Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and thanks for tuning in to SBAM's Small Business Briefing. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Operations, and I am welcomed today by Jacob Manning. Jacob, thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jacob Manning, Advocacy and Policy Manager with the Small Business Association of Michigan. Thanks for having me, Sarah.
All right, let's start off like we always do, which is welcoming one of our new members. This is an elite member. It is Anna Carolina Borgonovo and Capitious Consulting. So thanks for joining, Anna Carolina. All right, so Jacob, spring break is over. The Michigan Legislature has been off for the last couple of weeks, but they return this week from their vacations. What is at the top of their agenda?
Yeah, so legislative spring break is always one of the pieces on the calendar that marks a bit of a line on the calendar where prior to spring break, maybe there's some policy discussions that are happening. Then we have this extended spring break period this week, or this year it was about 3 weeks long for the House, 2 weeks for the Senate, and then they return, and everybody's mind is on one thing and one thing alone, and that is, of course, the state budget. So we expect that we are going to hear quite a bit about the budget in Lansing over the next couple of weeks and months, especially this week and next week, as we start to see what we call these budget committee hearings. So, if you look at state government, how state government's divided, um, each department in state government has its own budget, and each one of these sub budgets is controlled by its own committee, who has its own chair and is staffed by its own staff members, and as this certain members of the legislature are assigned to that committee to determine what the budget is going to be for that state department. And those are the pieces that make up the broader budget. So those individual budget subcommittees are going to be meeting over the next couple of weeks. And we hear that these committees already have their targets or what their budget is for their budget, their top level that they can't go over for how much they can spend in their individual budgets. So we will expect over the next couple of weeks that these committees will be meeting. They will be hearing from department personnel. They'll be hearing from different stakeholders who have different programs that run through the departments, and everybody is going to be advocating for their money or for their program to get some sort of funds in the budget. So after we have these hearings over the next couple of weeks, we will expect that these subcommittees will begin finalizing their versions of the budget. They will pass them out of their subcommittees. They will go to the big appropriations committee that oversees all of the subcommittees. And then we expect that maybe this month, if not early next month, we will see budgets pass out of the individual chambers. So the House will pass their own budget, the Senate will pass their own budget. And then we get what's called the Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference, or CREC, which is a fun acronym to say. So the CREC, we don't have an exact date on when that's going to be yet, but last year it was about mid-May, and we could expect it about the same time this year. And during that conference, there will be forecasters who come and take an assessment of the total revenue that's gone into the state in the last year. And what is reported out of that is they're able to tell legislators how much they have to spend on the budget. So there are some expectations that revenue numbers are actually going to be a little bit higher than expected, which is typically a good thing to hear, fewer cuts and fewer things left on the cutting room floor. But we will continue to keep everyone appraised of this. A lot is still unknown now, but what we do know is that this is going to be the legislature's sole focus, at least for the next couple of months. And we do want to promote, we have an upcoming webinar opportunity for members. It's not posted on the SBAM website yet, but we will be talking about that through our Watchdog newsletter. It's going to be me and Kelly Saunders, our Vice President of Policy and Engagement, and we're going to be talking specifically about SBAM's budget priorities, trying to make sure everybody knows all the things that we're advocating for in Lansing in the budget process. And that webinar is going to be May 12th at noon. So stay tuned for that. Watch the Watchdog newsletter, and we will be promoting that as well.
All right, thanks, Jacob. Yeah, go ahead and jot that on your calendars now before they fill up, because I know that happens quickly. So Jacob, beyond the budget, what are some of the other agenda items that our members should have on their radars from the legislature as we continue this spring and into summer?
Yeah, so I think for any policy discussion that we're having around the Michigan legislature, the elephant in the room in all of these discussions is going to be that the budget, or excuse me, oh my, the elephant in the room is that this isn't an election year, and the election is going to determine a lot. A lot of legislators have in their minds that they want to finish the budget this year, and then they want to go home because they want to be knocking doors so they can ensure that they can keep their own jobs or knock doors in other districts for their colleagues so that they can uh, return in majority in the next year. Everybody's trying to get a majority in either legislative chamber. So a lot of the sort of policy discussions are taking a bit of a backseat, at least while the budget conversations are happening. And the goal this year is to make sure that we can get a budget done before the deadline, unlike last year where we passed a budget in early October. So um, just overall, these policy conversations, it's important to note that a lot of legislators are not in policy mode right now. They're worried about the budget. So the first thing that we're sort of keeping an eye on is something that was hinted at, and we've discussed on this program as well prior to spring break, and that is the property tax proposal and sales tax proposal. We've talked extensively about these programs at this point, and it's important to note that for each of these proposals, there was a big property tax cut plan from the Michigan House of Representatives, and then a sales tax on services or luxury services potentially to backfill the revenue that would be lost through the property tax proposal. Uh, we still don't have any bill language on that, and just know that for us, that's going to be an item that we are keeping a close eye on, and if there are any relevant updates, we will keep members apprised of those. So also in policy, one of the areas where we feel like there could be a potential window where even in a year where there's not going to be a lot going on in policy world, we feel that there is enough consensus that we could potentially get things done on health insurance because we've been hearing we do quarterly surveys of our membership, and we've heard for years now that the price of health insurance has gone up year over year over year for about the last 20 years, and especially over the last since the pandemic, really, people have been experiencing double-digit cost increases. And we're hearing now that, particularly in this moment, we're experiencing a breaking point where employers are having to cut back on some of the benefit offerings that they can afford. And it's really affecting their business. It's affecting their ability to hire, keep, and attract qualified and quality employees. And so we feel that the moment is right to maybe get something done on health insurance. And there's really two things that we're closely tracking. The first one, we have been sort of experimenting with this idea of association health plans. So as listeners know, of course, small employers really don't have a lot of options on the health insurance market. There's not a lot that they can do to modify their plan design, or they can't reap the benefits of implementing a wellness program oftentimes, and they aren't really able to negotiate reimbursement rates like some of the large employers can, and that puts them at a disadvantage because they're paying more for their benefits for the same coverage for their employees than bigger employers. So right now, small employers are really restricted on how they can band together to form their own risk pools. We saw a change in this. In the first Trump administration, there was an executive order that allowed these things called association health plans to band together, where employers from different sectors could band together to form their own risk pools. SBAM facilitated an association health plan and really saw great success with it in the few months that it was allowed under executive order. But unfortunately, it was overturned by a federal court. The administration changes over, and it's sort of something that gets lost by the wayside. But in that time, since 2019, when this was overturned, we've seen a lot of states start to experiment with MIWA laws or multi-employer welfare arrangements. States have a lot of leeway for what they can do with MIWAs. It's something that a lot of states have been experimenting with, and we've seen states like North Carolina and Florida and Arizona bring back sort of association health plans like plans where they use the state MIWA authority to create cross industry risk pools for employers. So this is something that we're looking into now. We're having conversations with lawmakers and with the state regulators to see if this could be something that Michigan could pursue, because we know from our own experience facilitating a program like that at SBAM that this is something that that does work and helps bring down premiums for small businesses. We also have been looking sort of on the cost side. We've been looking a lot at just a topic of the day. We saw the Speaker of the House mention that he was interested in pursuing some sort of hospital transparency legislation. Um, we wouldn't want to commit to something like that before we were able to see the language around it, but we've seen other states implement a scale of things from on the one side of the scale, you have hospitals required to be transparent on certain billing. And then on the other end of the scale, you see like a complete rate setting organization like the Michigan Public Service Commission, but for hospitals. And so there's a wide range of how policy can be implemented to implement some sort of hospital transparency requirements, but we're intrigued to see what that would look like and are interested in having conversations about what that would be. Um, Moving on, we're also interested in the tort reform area. We've talked in this program about a piece of legislation, House Bill 4582, which passed the House before spring break that would bring back the open and obvious premises liability standard in Michigan. That's a piece of legislation that we're going to continue to push as it makes its way through the legislative process. It's in the Senate right now. We're having conversations with senators trying to get that through, pass the House on a bipartisan basis, hoping that they're open to having some conversations. We're also interested in pursuing what's called third-party litigation funding transparency, where essentially right now there are not really any transparency requirements if a plaintiff is suing a business, they can be propped up by a big out of state, could be out of country investor who's paying their legal fees. And in exchange for paying these legal fees, they are promised some percentage of the reward once the lawsuit ends. So, the only thing that we're trying to do in this space is make it so that if this is an arrangement that's going on, if there is a big backer behind a major lawsuit, that there is some transparency so people know that that the plaintiff is being supported by a third-party litigation funder. And the last thing that I want to mention is literacy. Literacy, of course, we've talked about this one a lot on the program too. It was something that was mentioned during the governor's State of the State address, and there is movement in both the House and the Senate on sort of different ideas for what we can do to address education in the state. And it's not really a secret to anyone that this is a major issue. Every major gubernatorial candidate is running on how our state's education system has. I don't want to be too harsh, but it's been trending downward over the last 30 years or so. And a lot of people are viewing this as an opportunity to get the state back on track. We see a lot of people citing the Mississippi Miracle and how Mississippi was a bottom performing state, but is now one of the top performing states because they implemented these new literacy programs. So we are very interested in the literacy conversation. It's one of our main pillars, one of our six policy pillars. We support the Launch Michigan framework and the Michigan Education Guarantee that they're proposing. There was a good piece in Bridge Magazine this weekend uh, talking about what that proposal is about and how they are, you know, their plan of attack is to go at it from a three-pronged approach, but to completely reform Michigan's education system to ensure transparency and proper funding getting in the right areas, and then a new literacy standard that makes it so, you know, right now you get a diploma and the only thing it really tells you is that you sat in a seat for the required amount of seat time in order to get your diploma. And we want to make sure that as advocates for employers, that employers know that when somebody graduates with a high school diploma, they know what that diploma means.
All right, Jacob, thank you. It was a big update. Appreciate you taking the time to kind of break everything down for us. Let's move on to our Election Watch 2026 segment. We have some important deadlines coming up. What can you tell us?
Yes, so a handful of different deadlines here. The ones that is most important for our process here at SBAM is this April 21st deadline, and this is the campaign filing deadline. So after April 21st, all of the candidates that are running for state house and state senate will be final. You need to file your campaign by April 21st, or you do not make the August 3rd primary ballot. So once we have a proper assessment of everybody that's going to be running for office, that's when we can begin our process. So the SBAM PAC, the Small Biz PAC, gets engaged, particularly in these House and Senate races, because this is where we do most of our work. And we do work here to ensure that pro small business candidates are elected to office. It makes the whole process better when there are pro small business candidates in office. So once we have the candidates that are available, our process is that we send out uh, questionnaires to each of the candidates that have declared. We go across the board. We are exhaustive. We find the emails for every single candidate that's running for statewide elected office, and we send them an email with our online questionnaire. And that questionnaire is required to be filled out and submitted in order for our small biz PAC to consider an endorsement. So how is the endorsement process done? Well, we have a board of about 20 small business owners who band together. We review all of the questionnaires. We review incumbent candidates, their backgrounds, their voting history, how they've been on small business issues over the years. And of course, the questionnaire is an important piece of that as well. And the Small Biz PAC will vote on whether or not SBAM will endorse those candidates. So we do consider endorsements in all 110 House districts, all 38 Senate districts. And so that is going to be an important deadline as we begin our election 2026 process prior to the August 3rd deadline. Now, we have another deadline coming up, and that is at the end of this month, we are going to have a campaign report deadline. So we will go over these every 3 months whenever there are new filing reports where candidates have to report how much they fundraise in a certain period. And this upcoming filing deadline in April is going to be a big one. I would say this is probably the most important one because especially in the Republican gubernatorial primary, it's still a very crowded field. This is going to be a deadline that tells us a lot. The next deadline isn't until July. By July, it's essentially August already for the August 3rd primary. And so by that point, it will be too late to make any determinations. But at this point, we'll be able to get some real insight into how the candidates are stacking up and who's raising and who's sort of falling behind. We did hear a couple of leaks earlier this last week. I know State Senator Mallory McMorrow, who's running for U.S. Senate, announced that she raised $3 million, which is a very good a very good haul for her in that first quarter of this year. But we will be expecting more that we will report on in the coming weeks. And we also have on Sunday we have the Democratic nominating convention. Brian and I talked a couple weeks ago about the Republican nominating convention where candidates were selected for Supreme Court, Supreme Court, Secretary of State, and Attorney General. And now the Democrats will have their turn to do that on Sunday. So still open primaries in the Secretary of State race in particular is going to be one that we're watching pretty closely, and we'll report back next Monday on that.
All right. Well, so Jacob, we just did the 2026 election watch, but gosh, we've had some buzz about the 2028 presidential election. So do we need to add election watch 2028 to our list of segments too?
That that sounds a bit nightmarish, but I guess we can roll it out. We can roll it out in advance and just have it ready for when we need to deploy it regularly. But uh, being that Michigan is this prominent swing state, and we have a lot of great talent that comes from Michigan, it's not really a surprise that there are some prominent Michiganders that are being considered for the state, or excuse me, the country's top job, president in 2028. And just this last week, Senator Alyssa Slotkin was in Iowa, and she was doing some campaigning for. There are a couple of toss-ups in Congress in Iowa, so she was campaigning, doing some stumping for them there. She did some interviews, and she was asked straight up, "Would you consider running in 2028?" She said that she would not rule it out. So, not necessarily a headline, not an announcement, but anytime you have a prominent politician from a prominent state like Michigan, which has become the center of attention for so many conversations with our purple nature back and forth, a candidate who can succeed statewide in a state like Michigan probably has some good intrigue when you're going into a primary in a year like 2028. So definitely not the last conversation that we're going to be having about 2028 election watch, but maybe we're planting the flag. This is the first.
All right. Let's talk about an important deadline that employers need to know about, and this is dealing with wage reports for unemployment insurance. So give us a little bit more detail.
Yes, so we have been we've been talking about how the Michigan Unemployment Insurance Agency has rolled out their new system. It's called MyUI. And this system is meant to modernize the unemployment insurance system and experience for both employers and claimants. And so there was a two-tiered rollout that they had. The first thing that they rolled out was the employer side, they call it the tax side. That rolled out in February, and then they will roll out the rest of the system for claimants this summer. So while the system rolled out in February, there wasn't really anything that employers had to do yet, or there weren't really many things that most employers had to do yet in the system. But now that's about to change because quarterly wage reports are due on April 27th, and they are not due in MyWAM. They are due in MyUI. So if you as an employer have not yet activated your MyUI account, it may be a good time to do so now. Sarah just posted an article that we put on our website, and we point to a couple resources in that article. I think if you're an employer who has uh, questions about this, they've done what they can to make it straightforward. We've experienced some bumps in the road, but that happens with any sort of new system rollout. And but they've laid out a lot of good resources. They have a website called MyUI University where they have very comprehensive guides to walk people through how do you fill out your new wage report in MyUI, how do you sign up for the new system, etc. And they even have two online seminars that they're going to be offering. There's one this week and one next week, April 15th. Wednesday is the next one, and then the following one is April 22nd, the same day as Michigan celebrates small business. So if you have not yet signed up for your MyUI account, the time is coming when quarterly wage reports are due. And if you have any questions about any of these pieces, there are some great resources that the UIA has made available.
All right. Well, thanks, Jacob. I know you've worked really hard to get the word out to our members. All right, and now it's kind of some fun news. Apparently, I was under a rock last week and missed it. There was an announcement made about the return of the WNBA to Detroit. Tell us more.
Yes, so wanted to close with a bit of a fun story, at least for me as a basketball fan. The WNBA and NBA boards of governors voted last week to expand to three new cities, Cleveland, Philadelphia, and of course, Detroit. There used to be a WNBA team in Detroit. It was called the Detroit Shock, and they won a lot of titles. They won three titles in the 2000s, and they used to play at the Old Palace in Auburn Hills. And they were eventually, after the 2009 season, moved to Oklahoma City. So Detroit has not had a WNBA team in that time, but we have seen this sort of blow up in the WNBA where the league has expanded greatly in popularity. They've been working on new media rights deals, and really in the last couple of years, there's been a lot more interest in the sport. And as a league, they feel that they're in a good place where they're able to expand, and they're bringing a team to Detroit. So there was a pretty broad ownership group that was brought together. It was some pretty high-profile Detroiters: Tom Gores, who's the owner of the Pistons, Arn Tellem, who's the vice chairman of the Pistons, Sheila Ford Hamp, who's the owner of the Detroit Lions, even Jared Goff, who's the quarterback of the Lions, all joined together, and they put in a bid for this team, and the team will begin playing in Detroit uh, in 2029, the 2029 season. So a couple years out, not next year or the year after, but they will be playing in 2029, and they will be playing 22 home games in the Little Caesars Arena. So more sports events in downtown Detroit, always a great thing.
Definitely. All right, before we say goodbye today, Jacob, why don't you give a little pitch for how people can get more involved in SBAM's advocacy programs? And while you're talking, I'm going to drop a couple of links here in the chat.
Yes, thank you for that. So the first thing that we want to tell you about, and this is our primary way that we as an advocacy team uh, can relay information to our membership, and that's the Watchdog newsletter. And this is a newsletter that comes out every Tuesday. We get stories that we pull from our partners at MERS News Service. We write our own stories, and then we will film like a little mini podcast of us breaking down the news of the day. It's usually about a 5-minute update. So if you're interested in what has gone on in Lansing politics over the last week, we try to make it as easy as possible for you to stay up to date. And that's through the Watchdog newsletter. Sarah dropped the link in the chat box, and you can sign up using that. We also wanted to let you know about an upcoming event that we have. It's called Advocacy Champs. This is a training opportunity. And really, we hear all the time people asking, how can we get more engaged with public policy at SBAM? And truly, the best way that you as a small business owner can get engaged, you have a lot of power in the political process. You have a very important voice to the legislative elected leaders in your community. And so we want to make it as easy as possible for people to engage in the process, learn how to use their voice. And so we offer this training. We're doing it all day. It's May 19th. It's going to be right here in the SBAM offices, and you can sign up using the link that Sarah dropped in the description. But during that training, we're going to talk about gubernatorial appointments through boards and commissions. We're going to talk about how you can effectively meet with a legislator, what you can bring to a meeting with a legislator, how can you connect with them best, what do they want to hear, etc. We talk about how to testify in committee. We're going to be bringing in a mock committee. It seems intimidating at first, but it's really not that scary. They're just people just like you and I, and they want to hear your story. And a lot of times, small business owners are the best testimony because they can bring real life stories to a situation. And then we also talk about media training. Again, we're talking about using your voice as a small business owner. People want to hear what your experience is. And so we we'll bring in partners for that as well to help with the media training aspect. But the sign up again is in the chat box below, and we'd love to see as many people there as possible.
All right, thanks, Jacob. Yes, please sign up for the Watchdog and for Advocacy Champs. All right, that is all we have for you today. I hope you have a great week, and we will be back here next Monday at 3 o'clock.
Thank you.